We gather in solidarity with the people of Iraq and Afghanistan today. Some of them will die today. Why? Because the U.S. empire covets the oil in their lands. They call it a war on terror, or the humanitarian crusade to bring democracy and human rights to Muslim lands. But we see through their weapons of mass deception. Iraqis and Afghanis have not only suffered terribly, they have resisted the occupation. And that is why the occupation forces are failing and will be brought home soon. What's our role to make it sooner? Canada is party to both occupations. Canadians are rightly proud that we did not join the other Anglosphere countries in invading Iraq. But Canadian troops in Afghanistan free up the United States to send more troops into Iraq. And what is Canada doing in Afghanistan? Taking an offensive military position, not peacekeeping. Bring our troops home. They're on the wrong mission.
Troops home! Troops home! Troops
home! Troops home now! Troops home now! We think of the war as being over there. It is. But the issues underlying it are also here at home in safe, fairly comfortable Canada. The U.S. military runs on oil and gets much of it from Alberta. The struggle for control over oil and the environment is right here in Alberta. John Foster Dulles, a major architect of U.S. power in the 1950s, said there are two ways to conquer a country. One is by force of arms, and the second is by taking control of its economy. The second route is more insidious and effective. The great appeal of the U.S. empire has been that it doesn't usually look like an empire. That's why these wars have been so damaging to U.S. standing in the world. The U.S. usually rules indirectly through client states like Canada. U.S. transnationals insert themselves into the business community of each country's business community and incarnate themselves as an indigenous ruling class. The way to defeat this kind of sneaky empire is to discredit our domestic elites when they sell out their own citizens and those of other nations. Now that it is losing the war, the U.S. is reverting to Dulles' second way, informal economic control. Iraq is set to enact a new law passing Iraq's nationalized oil industry over to foreign transnational corporations under very, very sweet terms for the corporations. If passed, Iraq will become a U.S. resource colony. Now, colonies lose control over the resources, ability to set the price, retain the profits and royalties, which go instead to Exxon and Shell, to upgrade the raw materials. Resource colonies lose the control to limit export and to cut greenhouse gases. The new Iraqi law threatens to take away its right to determine its own energy future. This scenario looks strangely familiar. Post-war Iraq would look, if this happens, would look like what the U.S. already has in Canada. How did their oil get under both Iraqi sands and the tar sands?
U.S. out! U.S. out!
U.S. out! U.S. out! Canada became a resource colony not through invasion, but through NAFTA.
Yeah.
NAFTA, well, the free trade agreement. Well, okay, it's been a long time, but it was really codified then. NAFTA gives the US unlimited access to Canadian energy. Canada must export the same proportion of energy, 2/3 of our oil and almost 60% of our natural gas, even if Canadians are running short during an Arctic cold front. Canada is the largest oil exporter to the US, larger than Saudi Arabia. Most of that oil and gas comes from Alberta, which gets as little as 25 cents a barrel on tar sand oil. Canada.
Abrogate NAFTA.
Abrogate NAFTA. Canada lost the ability to supply all its citizens with domestic oil. Eastern Canadians rely on imports of almost 1 million barrels a day of oil, 40% from OPEC countries, including Algeria, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq. Ordinary Canadians have no energy sovereignty or security.
Shame!
Shame.
We're crazy!
How can Canada and Alberta stop being America's fuel tank? First, impose a moratorium on new tar sands projects. Second, get a Mexican exemption on compulsory energy exports. Mexico doesn't do it, why should we? We cannot cut greenhouse gas emissions. If we do that at home here, all we're going to be doing under this NAFTA rule is exporting more to the US. So we have to get out of that first we have to get out of that in order to preserve our environment. Third, reduce oil exports to the US and send it to Eastern Canadians. Don't let the Eastern bastards freeze in the dark. Fourth, produce much less energy so we can make deep cuts to carbon emissions. Fifth, impose Norway-level royalty rates instead of giving it to Exxon and Shell. Sixth, use the extra energy, the extra revenues to fund a just transition to a post-carbon economy. Seven, follow Canadian public opinion and nationalize the oil industry. Seven, stop fueling the American war machine. Number 9, George Bush will meet Stephen Harper and Mexico's president in Alberta this June to gain even more control over our energy resources. Let's make them know how we feel about that. Finally, how to build for peace. No to wars for oil.
Yes.
No to greater tar sands production. No to oil corporations ruining our environment. Yes to popular sovereignty over Canadian energy. Yes to extending solidarity ties with Iraqis, Afghanis, and the Muslim world. And finally, yes to building a world of peace and social justice for all.